Hello. Welcome to Failcast F1, your fortnightly live stream of crashes, barriers, and opinions of a strong variety nature. My name is Mr. Bolkenberg, and alongside me, as always, kicking and screaming his way through the F1 paddock, it is Mr. Taco himself, Esther Ben. How you doing?
Hello, my friend. I'm here to enjoy the end of season festivities. Here we are, end of season 8, 6 points between us, much news to talk about, and I'm drinking a Red Bull Green Edition, kiwi and apple.
Ooh.
Special beverage for a special day.
Oh wow! It's a subliminal thing, but it seems to now be a regular addition. Every episode, a new F1 branded energy drink appears from out of nowhere. Because I don't even know half of these exist.
I'm not being paid for that, although I'm totally open to that. Just putting it out there.
We could hashtag sponsor the energy drinks.
Mm-hmm. We could.
What's it like, that
How
one?
are you,
That
my
sounds
friend?
intriguing, actually.
It's actually really pleasant. It's more apple than kiwi, which I think is the best way round. But yeah, they've got all the different colours now. They've got all the colours of the rainbows.
Pride Month.
I like the acai berry one, and the cranberry one's pretty good as well.
Ooh.
But also, I have a serious caffeine problem. That's the main core of this. This is why I'm drinking energy drinks every time we have an episode. Like here, there's a recycling system, right, in Germany. So you buy your drink, you drink it, and then you have to go back to the shop with your can and put it in this machine, and you get money for recycling. And today I took back a backpack and a carrier bag completely full of Red Bull cans. So I do have a legitimate problem. But it's nice it can be enabled as part of the podcast. How are you, my friend? Doing well?
Hello.
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Hello, David M. Thanks for joining. It's been a rather fabulous couple of weeks. Enjoyed the Monaco Grand Prix. There's a few other big things going on. Obviously, the Indy 500, which I found quite snoozy.
Only £1 today.
Oh,
That's correct, mate. I'm sorry about that. I'm having a few technical issues, but by the next stream it should all be sorted, and then we're back online. And we'll talk a bit about that later, because there's going to be some changes too. So
Yes.
It's good you brought that up.
yeah, thanks, Dave. So we had the Indy 500. There was the Coca-Cola 600 all at the same time. It was due to be like a big, huge motorsport weekend where I was getting together with lots and lots of sim racy friends to do that. Plans all went a bit awry, but the motorsport was good. Having grandiose fun. And I think we have cast since we went to Fruxton and the German EP, haven't we?
No, I don't think so.
So we went to real life stuff as well, which was great.
We did. We went to actual real life stuff. It's unusual, the social recluses that we are, but I was at Formula E at the Berlin E-Prix, which was fantastic, and you were at BTCC.
Yeah.
Were you not?
Over at Fruxton.
Shall we dive in and we can talk about
Yeah.
that very briefly before we get on to the actual episode?
Absolutely.
So late on, me brother, how was the race?
It was actually I'd done a weekend pass, and I think what was really the racing was fantastic because we had quite a few different things that we. I've gone on the tyre compound, and I know how terrible I am with tyre wear, so I'm going to do something different.
Careful!
This could all go horribly
Independent
wrong.
thought alarm.
Boo, 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 boo. It was fabulous racing all the way round. Went to different places around turn 1 and the first couple of the first chicane, because at Fruxton you can only get round one half of the circuit and the back half around Church and Chapel, because it just basically it goes off into a lake and a forest. You can't actually get anything round there, so you kind of see everyone disappear and you look at the TV displays. We saw quite a few good crashes, and then the thing that really impressed me was that afterwards they completely open up the paddock. If you've got the paddock tickets. So we walked through and we was on the track, we was in the grid, in the pits, when Lewis Hamilton's younger brother came in, because he races in something that's a support race for BTCC. They all parked up and I was in the pit garage busy taking photos of knackered tyres actually at the time. And I was like, oh, it's a Hamilton, take a picture. So yeah, really impressed with that whole thing. And apparently there's only 2 races that they do that in over the season. So if you want to try and look at everything inside and outside the paddock, Thruxton is definitely the place to go. Silverstone being the other one. How about Formula E?
Formula E was fantastic. The race wasn't up to a huge amount, but I think that's kind of down to the characteristics of the track. I didn't see any accidents, unfortunately, although I did see some touchy-feely moments with Jean-Eric Verne. So there was almost accidents. But on the whole, fantastic little weekend activity. They have qualifying and race on the same day. I paid a mere €5 for my day ticket.
Wow.
Which is about £3.75 in old money. And that gave me access to all of the things, except the pit lane and the track walk, really. And for the second year in a row, I got a free upgrade to a grandstand.
Oh, nice.
I've just got that kind of face, I suppose, like a latchkey kid. that poor homeless boy, look at him. So scruffy.
Chuck you in a wheelchair and pop you out as a grid boy. I'm a real boy!
However, I was down at the start-finish line for the grid walk. I saw DC and Mark Webber up close and in person. DC was there covering for Dario Franchitti on the TV coverage, and Mark Webber was just there because wherever there's a DC, a Webber's not far behind because they're like bestest best buds.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's getting better and better every year. I mean, now more manufacturers are getting into it, and you've got more teams coming on board. Also, for the first time, I noticed the differences in the cars because they're starting to open it up, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you can make your own, parts for your car, and eventually it'll become like Formula One. And what I noticed is, I want to say boo to Jaguar for 2 things. First one is their cars are like noticeably louder than everyone else's. But not noticeably faster in exchange for that. So I don't know what you're doing, Jaguar, but your cars sound horrible compared to all the others.
Oh, okay.
But also, I want to give them a big thumbs down because you know I like my merchandise, and you and I talk quite frequently about merchandise. I like to do my cheeky reviews. I want to do a quick one for Formula E, which I've never done before, and I want to say boo to Jaguar and to Renault Edams, both of whom doubled their merchandise price for the race weekend.
Ooh, dirty.
So you could buy a Jaguar Racing team T-shirt on the Formula E web shop for €35, but it was €72 if I remember correctly in the shop at the race.
That's criminal.
And those were the only teams to do that, Renault and Jaguar. Virgin Racing, which is a team I've supported since season 1. Props to them because their very reasonably priced merchandise was still the same very reasonable price in the shop. So I bought myself a cheeky. Well. They do have a lovely colour. I saw Sam Bird briefly. I've been to 3 Formula E Grand Prix in Berlin now, and at each one I have seen Sam Bird. We're getting to be like best buddies.
I was going to say
up at Christmas.
They should do the opposite with the prices. Want those colours on the fans around the track. Stupid business and marketing move.
Amen to that.
I agree, but I tell you something. Jaguar are kind of like the Red Bull of Formula E at the moment because everything in the fan zone, it's all Jaguar. It's funded. It would have been a much more barren place were it not for Jaguar's input. I mean, Audi too. They had some of their cars on show there and so on, but like Jaguar built their own bar and restaurant with bouncers. They had like press girls walking around in their gear. They had a Jaguar F-Type, the hybrid SUV thingy. They had one of those, like being driven around like a small test track, showing you how manoeuvrable it is.
I suppose that's kind of a bit of a thing of when you've got teams that are homegrown and they are specific to that kind of thing. They don't really have the not brand power, but like the wideness of being out and about in the world to be able to facilitate all of the extra stuff, and then you have to look at additional companies to do so. So I guess that's kind of a nice little knock-on effect of having big manufacturers in and about, I guess.
I think it's also a knock-on effect of the sport being so cheap to compete in compared to other tiers of motorsport. I think Formula E is doing a lot right. So if anyone listening has the chance to go, you should definitely go. It's a good day out. You don't have to buy tickets for the whole weekend or lose your whole weekend. It's, you know, you can go down for qualifying at like 2 p.m. and then be completely done with the race as well by 7 p.m. So it's like a 5-hour thing if you don't care about practice and the support races. They were still pushing Robo Race, which I still think is the stupidest technology in all of the world, because no one cares about robots racing each other, because you don't know if they're really racing. It could just all be like pressing the demo button on a keyboard. It sounds impressive, but is it really playing?
Yeah.
So I don't know why they're doing that. I also saw Nico Rosberg take the Generation 2 car around the circuit.
How'd that look?
That car looks fantastic. It sounds really good. I think it's taken everything in the right direction. I think their method of qualifying also is very interesting, and I want to see the new cars take part in that and see what they can do with all the extra power. All in all, great weekend. Big support for Formula E, and I think they're making a lot of the right decisions, and some of the teams, in fact most of the teams, are actually doing a really great job. It's also a sport that solves a lot of the problems that Formula One has, in that the competition is very, very tight, and independent teams are still very, very viable. In fact, an independent team's probably going to win the Constructors this year. So all in all, doing a lot good, and I'm enjoying Formula E immensely. But anyway, this isn't Failcast Formula E. That's an idea for the future, maybe. This is Failcast Formula One. So maybe we should talk about the F1s.
Yeah. So we had the Monte Carlo Grand Prix, didn't we? That's come out.
We did. Or we had what passes for the Monte Carlo Grand Prix, depending on who you listen to in the press.
Yes, and I guess that's one of the bigger talking points that's come out around what we think about Monaco. Does Monaco need to stay or go? And it does seem to be probably the most divisive thing that isn't Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it is. But I have to say, I mean, I think you and I disagree on this a little bit, but from my trawlings of the depths of the internet, it seems to me that the majority seem to be advocating for it to be dropped, and I find that really, really worrying. And I don't know if there's just that there's a correlation between, you know, being reactionary and, you know, being maybe a younger demographic that's going to be on Twitter. But I actually I got another F1 fan survey, which I recommend everyone sign up to. That was asking stuff about the Monaco Grand Prix, and there was a section where you could leave quite a detailed comment. And I basically wrote in there, like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're thinking of doing. I can tell from the way you've worded the questions, and I'm telling you, don't do it, because you're chasing people who will never be satisfied, and they will never stay. And you need to be a signpost rather than a windsock. You need to, like, know what you are, and know that not everybody is going to like you all the time, because otherwise you're just going to make stupid decision after stupid decision. And I really hope someone reads it, because I really took my time, and I tried to sound, you know, as calm and reasonable as possible. I didn't want someone to think it was like a tirade, but it's super important to me that Formula One doesn't go too far with this listening to the fans, because I mean, I was more disappointed with the drivers, actually. And more than a few people pointed out,
Monaco
like Lewis
has to
Hamilton.
stay. As soon as the cars are able to follow each other properly, it will be much more interesting again.
See, I kind of agree with you on that, because when I defend Monaco, and I do, it's not that I'm okay with boring racing. It's that, you know, Monaco's a special case and so on. And I think if the cars, if F1 got over its fear of ground effect, and the cars weren't so dependent on aero on the other surfaces of the car, but actually allowed it to basically suck itself to the track, Monaco will become viable again. And so I don't think it's irredeemable. But by the same measure, it just bothers me that the narrative has been not just from subsections of the fan base, but from the press, from people who should know better in the F1 community, and from active drivers. That it's boring, there's no overtaking. And Lewis Hamilton in particular was called out by quite a few people because he was highly critical of Monaco this year. And people were pointing to tweets from 2 years ago when he won it, and he was saying, it's the best feeling ever, it's the greatest track, and so on. And the only discernible difference between that race and this one is that he won the other one.
Exactly.
And so you can't have it both ways. And I called WTF1 out on this as well, because if they want to be a Formula One outlet, and for better or worse it seems they are.
Critical of Monaco. In the year, he has a car that is not superior on it.
Surprise, exactly.
Surprise.
And I think he needs to be a bit more responsible with his words. I mean, I just think we're in an age now where Formula One is perhaps not just ready to listen to fans, but maybe a bit too eager to listen to fans. And the ones that make the most noise are not necessarily representative of all of us. And some of the questions that have been in those F1 fan surveys recently have absolutely terrified me. Because some of them sound horrific.
We do have some slightly differing opinions on some of the stuff that's going on, but I think we are both very much in agreement about Monaco being a thing that needs to stay, doesn't need to have a reactionary weird type thing. Funny enough, Mark Priestley was having this on his YouTube channel, which I am an avid fan of his channel, and I definitely recommend to people to take a look at it. And he replied to me on there, and I was basically saying, and it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit to the race review, but it's symptomatic of the way how the cars are so wide, and you've got this ground effect and all the problems that are going on around aerodynamics, that people were so scared to come in for that second stop of tyres, but all they'd have done was trigger one, and then the rest would have probably had to have followed in. And what an amazing race that would have been in the last 15 laps, potentially, of everyone recatching back up a wounded car, instead of being so scared shitless that they didn't want to do that. And maybe, actually, my on that fan thing, they was basically saying, what would you do differently around Monaco? And I could see people were saying, just do it as a qualifying time trial. No. Don't make me sick.
This is the kind of stupid shit that people are bandying around, and I'm terrified they're going to do some of it.
Exactly. And my radicalisation was is something that I don't want for Monaco, but I'd actually like across the whole season. And that's if you're bringing 3 tyre compounds to a race weekend, make sure that you have to use all of them during a race weekend. Because that for me gives the strategy and then the push to overtaking if you've got someone that's 2 compounds apart. Ricciardo was saying make everyone bring hypersofts to every race weekend, which is an interesting one, and that was one of the questions in that survey, wasn't it?
Yeah, but also it's quite good for him to say that when he's got a car that is arguably the best on the hypersofts.
Exactly, and for me,
it's
what you were saying with Lewis Hamilton and what David was saying in the chat there, none of these drivers, I think, we can let them have their opinions, but by no means should their opinions be the be-all and end-all, because of that whole political and sporting aspect of you can't. It doesn't matter. You are manipulated into you're in the competition. Therefore, you are not objective anymore because you're in it.
Exactly. It's kind of like an Olympic swimmer saying, "Well, I really think drugs tests are unnecessary. I mean, can't you just trust us?" This doesn't hold water. By the way, the gap between you and I, 0.023 seconds.
Oh, hello. I ran wide at turn 1, which I think gave me a tenth.
You are fastest by 3/10 in Sector 3 exam.
This
Terrible.
being the last race of your season, you ahead in the standings. Are you going Schumacher on Simon?
It's the first year I've beat him, actually, in all the years we've been doing this. It's taken 8 years, but I there's a chance. I'm not going to say it's happened, because I could just bin it and he could end up winning. But no, I will be beneficent in defeat and in victory, and I think it's better to sort of be benevolent and keep the waters calm, mate. You know how it is. but I've really enjoyed this season because we've been so close all the way through.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been like odd races where one of us is like way out behind or something, but across the length of the season, the fact we're separated by only 6 points, and here we're separated by a fraction of a second, like that shows the move to PlayStation was the right thing for us.
Definitely. I'd also say as well that the reason on those races where we have been mega apart, it's normally because of a front wing or wonky AI or something like that. It's not necessarily been pace-wise, has it?
No, that is also true. Interesting, though, is that you are so much faster than me in Sector 3. I can't hook up Sector 3 on this track. I've never been able to.
I either can or I either go wildly wrong and I go deep into that third right-hander before the little going under the thingamabob, or I get it right and it's okay. It's one or other.
One or the other. But going back to what we were talking about,
Yeah.
I just think Monaco is something that's going to appeal more to the genuine lovers of the sport, right? That I'm still interested in seeing the best drivers in the world drive fast and unruly cars around a difficult circuit.
Yeah.
And, you know, all the people who are saying, well, there's no overtaking, I'm pretty sure there's probably a strong overlap if you drew a Venn diagram of people who think Monaco is boring and people who think DRS overtakes are annoying. And it's like, well, what do you want? What do you want? Because if we make it easier for things to overtake each other, then you say, well, it's artificial, they're not doing it on merit.
Yeah.
And then when the circuit is a skill circuit that, okay, yeah, it's very hard to get past anyone on it, but it's not impossible, then you say it's boring. I mean, you literally can't have it both ways.
And you see news articles and news outlets equally as awful at this, because if you chart people's progress, and I think this is one of a personal hatred of me just in general across news, is that you will have counter argument for counter argument. No one sets out that stall and says this is what we genuinely think. It's about doing that reactionary, this race was awful, therefore never go to Monaco again. And then in 2 years' time there might be like an amazing Monaco race and they'll be like, come back Monaco, all is forgiven and DRS is amazing and blue flags need to be banned, and no one puts their sticks in the sand and says that's how I feel. It's just constant flicking from one to another. Drives me out the wall.
Yeah, that is definitely something I want to talk about, actually. And we will get onto the race once we're in the race, of course. But
yeah,
because since the 2015 season, I think you and I have been trying to take a more measured approach to one Mr. Verstappen.
Yes.
And the press have been very scared to touch him up until the last sort of 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And now every news outlet I go to is
But
just
that is a
slapping
side
him.
effect of Formula One entering the social media era, Simon.
True.
Absolutely.
True.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I think it's more our concern is people listening to people on social media rather than,
because the people that make the actual decisions are like, oh, social media is the new thing, because those are the people who are in their 50s probably and are like stroking their massive beards and moustaches. We know who we're talking
Dickensian.
about. Yeah. And like as a communications manager where I work, I go in and I have to sit there and listen to people and go, but this social media tweet was retweeted 6 times and seen by 1,000 people. So I feel that actually we have an amazing research to change the lives of 4 million people on benefit. And that's kind of, I can see the same thing happening in Formula One, because it's people who don't understand the nature of social media in its variety of guises, and that's what I think Ben also alludes to quite a lot about then reactionary decisions on the vocal minority who are vocal, but it's the people that get to be counted.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, democracy in a way, that the people who use the vote are the ones that are listened to.
Yeah.
But you sort of, the majority are kind of apathetic somehow. And if you look at like voter turnouts in elections, it's something pathetic like 45%.
Yeah.
And those 45% are deciding the future of the entire nation because no one else can be asked voting.
Exactly.
I sort of think social media's got the same kind of effect on the sport, to be honest, because I think the people who are religiously watching every session, I would hazard a guess that the vast majority of them are sort of the same age as my dad, and they don't care about social media at all. And then you get into the argument, well,
everybody knows how the ballots work. Twitter or Facebook votes are a different beast in that regard.
Exactly.
Very true.
Zero.
Uh-huh.
Very true. And so it just... I also think that because they're pushing the F1 fan voice thing so strongly through social media, and like I know so many, let's call them more mature Formula One fans who would never bother to fill out one of these online surveys.
No.
I imagine, and you know, this is something Bernie knew all too well. This is why Bernie didn't go near social media, and I think that was wrong as well. I think both sides of the, you know, the extreme end of the spectrum on this issue are wrong. But Bernie always said, well, the young people who use social media are not the majority of viewers, and they have no money to buy a Rolex. That was his famous quote, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They're not interested in a Rolex.
Yeah.
And so that's why, you know, F1's always had these big blue chip sponsors, and it's always been about sort of, you know, if we're going to paint people by group, it's always been about sort of 40, 50-year-old white guys with plenty of disposable income. You know, and I think F1 has to, again, in so many ways, decide what it wants to be. I understand the desire to get in a new generation of fans, and that's super important, but you can't just let them kick the door down and dictate what the sport is. And I think there's some...
social media on YouTube, top, like it. Their use of social media in decision making, hate it, as I usually do. Lazy
and that's a very perfectly reasonable position to take. I would agree with you 100% on that. Like, social media has its place, has its uses. It just shouldn't be used to steer the ship, because, you know, people are super reactionary. I care too much about the sport. I think that's the problem. And should we talk actually about the fan survey really quick?
Yeah.
Some people might not have seen it, and some of the ideas that were being bandied around were a point for the fastest lap of a race, points for pole position, points for the fastest lap in free practice, a sprint race, with the sprint race either being used for in lieu of qualifying, in which case how do you decide how it starts, or as a separate race. And then, you know, there were questions, well, if we did sprint racing, would you want it to be part of the main championship, or would you like it on to be like a separate championship? And all the questions were sort of oddly specific, that you and I agreed, didn't we, Simon, that it seemed they'd already made their mind up and they were gauging how many people it was going to piss off.
That sprint decision race, I think, is already decided, and was followed up also by an additional poll around what does Formula 2 do with its sprint races as well. So it's like, oh, we can't be seen to be copying Formula 2 because it's a lower junior category. So how are we going to change that so that it looks like we're kind of realigning the sports so that actually we're not treading on each other's toes? So, because I was kind of thinking, where the hell do you stick a sprint race for Formula 1 in a race weekend, where it looks like Formula 2 is going to be the thing that gets a redesign so that it can be slotted in. What would briefly? What do you think? I
can give you a rundown.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there was a lot in there. Stuff like, you know, should we shorten the races to 1 hour long? Because they've done some research and they think people don't have the attention span for marathon races.
Which makes me sad.
And stuff like, should we just get rid of 2 of the free practice sessions? And it's like, you're a sport, for Christ's sake. Pull yourself together. Yeah, but I mean, I found you were actually way more open to change than I was. I will quite gladly run you through my objections very, very quickly. I object to a point for the fastest lap in free practice because why? It just, what have you achieved? All it encourages teams to do is compromise their testing plan in the chase of a glory lap, and no one's watching free practice anyway because they don't. And when I say nobody, I mean the casual fan.
Exactly.
Giving away a single point is in most cases, not going to decide a championship. And if it did, people would be furious. Can you imagine someone won a title with a point they won in free practice 3? I mean, come on.
Friday introduced the old qualifying of the early/mid-90s. GT for
I actually like that, but my argument against points for qualifying is that pole position is the point. Pole position is the prize. That's what you're competing for. Like that is what you win. I don't understand why you need to give an incentive on top of an incentive.
I get it.
Because also, you don't need that point. If your car is fast enough for pole, it's probably fast enough to win the race. You're getting the points anyway. Why do you need... All that's going to do is, in years where teams like Mercedes are dominant, it's just going to mean they're going to end up with 21 more points than they already were going to.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of swing and roundabouts for pole position because for me, I feel like it is an achievement, and I do get where you're coming from, but I think it's only a worthwhile cause if the grid was closer and there was more people vying for it. Otherwise, you're right, completely right. Same for fastest lap in the race. I always find it interesting with Formula 2 is that you can only get the fastest lap point if you actually finish in the top 8 already, because what they were trying to stop people doing was that everyone outside of the top point scoring, say if you broke your front wing and came into the pits at the end and stuck on some fresh tyres, they were all going out and getting the fastest lap and getting that point. And I kind of thought, I don't know quite if I like that stance or not either, because it feels then artificial that everyone's chasing a point that you wouldn't necessarily go for. So it opens up so many kettles of fish. I just my brain goes.
You see what I mean? It just strikes me as reactionary again. It's just they're not thinking things through. They're so desperate because people are saying they're bored all the time. Like, oh, we'll give away a point for qualifying. I mean, what happens if someone wins the title just because they got pole position? They're not thinking about the long-term impact on the sport. They're thinking about, well, what's going to make next weekend more interesting?
Like Abu Dhabi with the double points fiasco. The
exactly.
The barrel of shit that was going to happen with that.
With the point system is really ever a good way to fix imbalance.
However, saying that, David, maybe it's the back marker loving in me. I was all for points going down to 15.
Actually, I wasn't. That's another thing we disagreed on, because I was like, look, show me a loser and they're a loser. I'm not going to give them points.
Do you think you've gone too far with the top 10 getting points then?
I can tolerate top 10, but it feels odd to me that 50% of the grid get points.
Yeah, because with an emaciated field, it does feel a bit weird. I get what you mean.
I'd say, if we're down to...
Points should still be earned. Top 10 seems good.
I would go top 10 if we were back up to the 14 teams or 13 teams or 12 teams, whatever they wanted. Now we're down to 10. I'd say top 8 is probably enough, because I do understand the utility of giving points.
No matter how you skew it, dominant will still be dominant.
Yeah, it will, and I'm very aware of changes that will exacerbate that. Then the sprint race. The sprint race annoys me because there are teams that, as it stands, can barely afford to stay operational, and I don't see how having another race with running costs and potential repair costs is going to help anything. And the fact is, Max Verstappen had an accident in FP3 at this Grand Prix, and it messed up his qualifying. What happens if there's a massive crash in the sprint race on Saturday? How many cars are then DNS on Sunday?
Yep. And you
just
can't
not
afford
thinking.
that. No, and then I see people in the comment section going, well, they should just all drive an independent car altogether. And it's like, that will never happen. It will just never happen because of sponsorship and commercial deals and stuff like that. It just doesn't happen.
Max can take out half the field for an entire weekend in a sprint race faced with stuck out tongue.
Exactly. And then the other one is I saw there was a question pertaining to reverse grids, which is an idea that I loathe. It was like, do you think reverse grids will improve overtaking? Well, what a nebulous question. I mean, 9 times out of 10 it probably will, but are the overtakes worth seeing? Lewis Hamilton overtaking a Williams this season, who gives a crap? Stroll's probably not even going to fight for it. And reverse grids baffle me because you're disincentivizing the thing you're supposed to be incentivizing. You can't be the pinnacle of motorsport, strive for the top, and then suddenly flip the table topsy-turvy. Because what would you do? Why would you do that?
And that's going back to its identity of what do you want F1 to be? Again, isn't it?
I mean, if you look at how tight Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes are this year, right? And that's what we want to see. Project that forward into a world where qualifying results in a reverse grid or the sprint race results in a reverse grid. You've then got 3 fairly closely matched teams competing with each other not to win. Because the race that pays the big points is a reverse grid and they don't want to be stuck behind each other.
Yeah.
Because let's say they even offer, like, they were talking about like half points for the sprint race or whatever. On balance, double that number of points. I'm pretty sure I've had this verified by mathematicians is more points, so you care more about Sunday. So the whole thing to me just seems completely ridiculous, and it's like one of those movies from the 90s where someone has a bet about taking the plain girl and making her pretty. It just never ends well. It never ends well.
Yeah.
Just accept that it's a sport, it's quite a dry sport, and some people are just never going to like it no matter how much you change it. And the more you change it, the more you alienate the fans you already have.
The interesting thing for me around the reverse or the sprint race and something like that was the way how they framed it, that the sprint race comes before the feature race, which makes sense because it's all gearing up towards a Sunday. The way how it works in the Formula 2 and GP3, it is mainly those because European F3 doesn't do reverse grids, is that the feature race comes first, and then because it awards more points, you're incentivized to go for the win, and then it's just if you end up being 8th, then you get pole position the next time round or whatever. And so you're incentivized to go for the big points, and then if you bugger it up, then you've got a chance for a bit of a weird one on the sprint race on the Sunday with the least points. And the way how they was framing the sprint race for me was that it carried so much weight that you would end up with people going a bit nuts and then compromising their Sunday or not wanting to participate at all in the sprint race because it's an afterthought because it's got less points potentially. It just I know. And then there's the whole, if it's a separate championship, why bother then? It's like when they done in the 80s when you had the non-aspirated championship. Tyrrell was a world championship, but it gets about 3 minutes of time on the season review at the end. That's not going to provide them a budget for next year on their car.
No, the thing is, like, I felt I had to answer the question with make it a separate championship because to have it non-championship to me makes zero sense because of the risk and cost to the teams. Like, you have to give them something. And then I object to the idea so fundamentally that I certainly don't want actual World Championship points to be awarded for it. So it had to be, the only option available to me was make it a separate championship. But I loathe the idea.
Because the way
the only way I would maybe be okay with it, the only way, is if the teams... But then again, it adds more cost, and that's what I object to. But, go back to the days where you have more chassis. You bring a T-car or whatever, and you have a T-car sprint championship on the Saturday with young drivers.
What, and add it for the constructors, or...?
No, not even have it for the constructors. Have it as a separate championship, just like an addition, like another support series, but Formula 1 spec machinery for unsigned drivers.
I'd like that. I think that would be quite cool.
And make it a wild card system. Make it a wild card system, right? So it's not George Russell automatically drives some Mercedes. Switch it up. Do a draw. I still hate it because teams then have to spend money on an extra car, probably extra staff to maintain it all, and the pits all have to be expanded.
Take a driver from F2?
Well, that would be your promotion up, wouldn't it? If you win F2, then you get to... I don't know. Well, F2 does provide quite a lot of I want to say brownie points, but that's not the right word at all. What's it? The FIA points for you having to have a super license. That's it.
Super license points, yeah.
Brownie points. No, Simon. You know what I mean.
Well, to be honest, F2 drivers are usually at the same place anyway. But it doesn't automatically have to be F2 drivers. It could be anybody. I mean, remember years ago there was all the talk about Valentino Rossi driving for Ferrari.
Yeah.
Well, suddenly this would be a realistic possibility. You could literally throw anybody qualified to drive in there.
Mm-hmm.
Nico Rosberg could come back. Just have it wild card, and rotated by weekend, and it's there basically because when you evaluate drivers under test conditions, you don't really get to evaluate them, and you don't use FIA test sessions on like commercial tie-up sponsorship. Let's plug each other drives. So why not open it up to cross-discipline F2 drivers, young drivers and so on, where you can evaluate them in a race environment and it's got almost no consequence. And the only reason I say that, I agree it's not a great idea. I only say it is because they seem obsessed with the idea that they need a sprint race. I agree, this is what F2 is for, and it's what it should be for. Mm-hmm. But F1 seems to think it's not. So, based purely on that, if they're going to do a sprint race and they're going to force the teams to spend the money and time and resources to compete in it, then at least add something else in there rather than making your established drivers run another race that's going to end exactly the same as the feature race in most cases.
Yeah.
I don't see why making Lewis win 2 races each weekend is better than making him win 1. I just don't see the incentive.
I also...
You'd rather see an F1 Oval Series than a Sprint Series teeth grinning face.
You set a shiver down my spine.
I'm literally crying on the inside there, Dave. Don't do it!
Is that you, Satan?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. Jolyon Palmer coming towards me. Yeah.
Jolyon Palmer, Oval Series World Champion.
Yeah. Who I must say, actually, now that I've heard him do some commentary, he's rather good at it. So, well done for ruining your F1 career, because you're actually not too... I've just binned it out the final corner. We're okay. Right. Yeah. He's not so bad. But, no, I guess as well, there's also this thing for me, and this is what stops... One of a couple of reasons that stops me ever really being fully engaged in NASCAR is you can have too much of a good thing. And they seem to be quite interested in getting us up to at least 25 races. And everyone's like,
which I hate.
I feel like we're kind of on our limit at the moment. And I know we've talked about this before, and I floated the idea of having a continent Grand Prix at the end, which changes round. So at least there's always an opportunity for different tracks to come on and be tested and all of that kind of stuff. But I think you can have too much of a good thing. NASCAR already has too much of a thing, whether it's good or not. And yeah, I'd rather... I don't want to see it go above 21. And I think that's pushing it.
No, I mean, the teams are already away from their families for an excessive period of time. It's incredibly expensive to participate in Formula One. Entry lists for teams are the lowest they've been in recent years, and there seems to be no interest from other teams to come into the sport. I don't see any measure that makes it more expensive to be here for the teams that are here and just clinging on by their fingernails. I just don't see how it's good for the sport.
No.
I mean, I think this season's actually been really good on balance thus far, and I think we're finally at a point in these regulations where competition is starting to happen and you don't have a 2-tier formula. And just when we reach that point, they sign an agreement to change the rules radically for next year.
As many races as we have, the schedule should be improved regarding the travelling for the...
Yeah, actually, regarding the schedule in general, because I think a lot of while Liberty is always like, oh well, we should take away, we need to remember our European roots and all of that kind of stuff. There's also something around splitting up the European season for me into chunks a little bit, and so that you have a run of European races, but that it doesn't all focus in Europe for like several months in a row, so that you almost saturate your market, so that if you spread stuff out like a couple of months apart from each other, and then you have like a round two. I know we've got Canada in the middle, but maybe they should move America into the middle, and have like a little American leg. It might generate a little bit more income for some of those European races, so that it feels a bit fresher, and then people don't like spend months on end out in Asia, and so on and so forth. This lap is awful.
I kind of agree with you, but I'm also aware of the logistical cost.
Yeah.
And that, that's why, Mexico and Brazil and the USA are close together, and
oh yeah.
Why Japan and South Korea and India were bunched together when they were on the calendar.
Yeah.
It's expensive to fly all the teams around the world and then fly them back again to fly them out to the same point again.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying in principle, because when I'm picking, I want to attend the Grand Prix next season. When I'm looking at which one I want to attend, it makes very little difference which one I go to, because they're so close together. The other problem, of course, is the weather in Europe is. You have that very narrow window for what passes for summer in most of the countries here, unless you go, sort of south of central Germany.
Yeah.
And so all the northern and western European races really have to be running quite a narrow window to avoid each one being guaranteed wet. But then again, there could also be something to that. I still like the idea of, a Scandinavian Grand Prix late in the season where, there's a bit of a chill in the air, and the problem is just you run the risk of it being snowed out. I don't know, it's such a hard problem to solve, Formula One. It really is.
Mm-hmm. But
that's also to go in and out again.
That's because it also, everything is in such a narrow operating window, in a way that.
This winter during testing, when it was freezing, I thought that might be an interesting race scenario.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my chops, because they're all struggling for grip. But I bet that would have caused a really interesting strategy, just general drama. Oh, fuck me.
But also, Pirelli have made snow tyres for Formula One. It is possible.
Yeah.
I've seen it done more than once.
Yeah.
So, to me, I don't see how that's really different from taking wets to a Grand Prix.
No.
And yes, it probably gets more expensive because you have to have even more coloured tyres in the Pirelli Rainbow. Because then you have to have tyres that operate better in colder climates and potentially snow or sleet. But I'd be open to that kind of change. There are certain things that change and liven things up without damaging the integrity of the championship. And night races is a good example, right? Places like Singapore, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, they look fantastic. Visually fantastic when the races happen at night. And that was something that years ago just wouldn't have been feasible. And to some people, maybe that sort of change isn't radical enough, but for me, absolutely. You need to. You can't chase success by completely cutting out what people already like. I think it's a zero-sum game, and you're going to end up with zero.
Definitely zero.
But I think there's been some interesting points in our discussion of it, and it's been cool to compare ideas with you as well, Simon, because I actually thought you and I would align a bit more in what we thought, but it seems you're quite the free spirit compared to me.
Yeah. I guess for me, so things that I don't mind, anything that gives incentive for more points for teams up and down, so long as the weighting is still that doing well is better. I think for me, that survey lacked the option of the box other. Because I didn't necessarily align with almost any of their questionings and answers. And I wanted to submit my own versions, which I know would have been impossible to, or very difficult to kind of maintain for people. But I'd have really liked some, if you've got any other thoughts, pop them here. But yeah, that was awkward. So for me, more points the better. But then I want lower costs so that there can be more cars on the grid, because one of the things that upsets me the most at the moment is the grid level. And therefore the lack of driver progression, having our where else apart from Ericsson can we have a new Adrian Sutil clicking around?
Where are we going to find our Sutils? Who think of the children?
Ericsson. Yeah, exactly. Think of the children's. There's so much to be had, and so for me, more points is good. I personally don't mind a reverse grid in lower formulae, and I'd be interested to see how reverse grids work elsewhere, but I wouldn't want it to get in the way of a championship. I'd want them to test out exactly what it is and finesse exactly how many points would facilitate to that before it was integrated into a championship, because otherwise it becomes a farce. I think one of the things that would and it does become then artificial and a bit more luck based, but I think because I've watched so many junior formulae, and on occasion I find those races to be really, really exciting, I need to align in my head whether or not I prefer some artificially organised fun over the technical prowess of stuff. And that changes for me quite often depending on mood. So yeah, I'm open to change, but I want tested change. I don't want change that just flollops out and it's like, oh hey, Formula 1 2.0 new era, by the way, we've now all got to do a Joker lap. What?
That's something that's being talked about for Formula E actually. A Mario Kart style pad.
Yeah.
That's off the line that you have to drive over once per race, and it gives you a power boost. And I sort of thought, no, just no.
Because fan boost is, I still think, quite a divisive thing in itself.
How have I dropped to 4th?
I have a funny feeling you might drop to 5th, because that is the best lap I've done in ages. I'm pole!
I have,
some
you...
blue shells as well while we are at it.
Had some
were on
blue
pole?
shells. I don't know where that came from.
That was a hell of a lap. You were almost a second faster than me. I mean, I bullsed my lap, but wow. That
will
was
never happen again. I'm sorry, world, I'm sorry. It's alright, I'll bin it out of turn 1.
No, I have to applaud you. You don't want me to win this season, do you? That was a hell of a lap, Simon.
YGG Simon.
Thank you. Yeah, throw in some blue shells. And it is that point of... because Formula 1 have gone for the esports side of the world and stuff like that now as well.
It's as unexpected for the viewers as it is for you, face with stuck out tongue.
Thanks. Yeah, for me, it's all around this esports and gamification type of stuff. And now they're trying to bring that in. They need to understand that F1 is not a computer game, and there is some real differences between actually working for something. But we've discussed this all ad infinitum before. But yeah, you know what I mean. Right.
What strategy are you taking, Chief?
I don't know.
I might two-stop. Just because I don't believe it's as slow as it's telling me it is.
It's only 4 seconds.
What? Let's assign the sim racer to each driver on the grid, and randomly for 5 laps the driver loses control, and the sim racer steer.
Amazing. I can't decide. I'm not so. I have raced on soft tyres around here before, and I find it quite slow.
Yeah, I don't like them.
I really like
but
the super
also,
soft.
I don't like the extra pit stop.
I'm gonna 2-stop, but I'm gonna look at my tyre wear as I go, because my tyre wear is horrific as usual. Which is why I went for the harder tyre compound bringing in for the race. which has made no difference to this whatsoever. Actually, to be fair. Okay.
So then, shall we talk Monaco Grand Prix and then we can mop up all the rest of the stuff? Obviously not a thriller by any stretch of the imagination, but I did still enjoy it. I took some positives away from it. I particularly enjoyed Max Verstappen finally being spanked by his team.
Yes.
Which was been long overdue, and it was the first time I saw Christian Horner look genuinely happy about Daniel doing well. And he could not be more effusive in his praise, which he's never been like that before. He's always been sort of like, yeah, Daniel's great. And then after the race, he sort of smiles, but he looks pained somehow.
Yeah.
Whereas this time, it genuinely seemed genuine, and he was astonished, talking to the Channel 4 people about Daniel's performance, which, to be honest, I was astonished by it as well. I thought he did
Right after
phenomenally
the
well.
overtake, keep the rest of M clean, Max. Loved it.
Oh yeah, that as well, telling him to keep it clean.
Yeah.
I thought Daniel did do astonishingly. His did you see he's on board for his lap from free practice or quali?
Yeah.
That was Senna-esque to me. I mean, really, I don't remember anyone else looking so smooth and comfortable around Monaco.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. Poetry to watch. That car was mega hooked up. And he was as well.
Yeah, I mean, fastest in every session. So, I mean, I saw some people on Twitter saying, well, Max would have won if he hadn't crashed it.
No.
And first of all, yeah, well, you've answered your own question, haven't you, really? Because you did crash it.
Yeah.
But by the same measure, I don't think he could have touched Daniel that weekend. In the sessions where they both finished without problems, it wasn't close. So.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah, exactly.
Shimmy.
Then, of course, there's the fact, he lost his top two gears, he lost his rear brakes, he lost 25% of his engine power, and he's already got the third engine out of four anyway.
Crazy.
And even though Monaco kind of, that if you're going to have those problems, it's the best track to have them at. I just thought he was phenomenal, so
Good luck,
calm.
guys. Be nice to your front wings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All my starts have been bad for the last 3 rounds, so I need a good start. And you're so far ahead of me that I can't allow that to happen. I have to fight to get through. I want to win this season. I'm actually feeling quite competitive for the first time.
I'm not good at Abu Dhabi.
Oh, that's my first good start in a while.
I can see you attacking people. Ooh, I've gone out wide.
I've come out of that in the exact same place I started it because I chickened out in the corner.
That is okay.
I hope you're expecting me, Mr. Bond.
I really hope the appreciation Red Bull have for him actually lasts because he has been great for them for quid.
Yeah.
Hold that thought, because it took them less than a day to then go to the press and say, well...
that a drive like this will secure him one of the Ferrari or Mercedes seats.
Me too. Oh, Kimi, stop it. Oh, it was Vettel, actually. Still, stop it. No, it's funny that you should say that, because it took them less than a day to then talk to the press and say, well, we're more bothered about signing a new engine contract than we are about renewing Daniel's contract. And I was thinking to myself, I think you might have your priorities wrong, because let's be honest, there is only one place that's going to sell you an engine next year, whereas Daniel could go anywhere. And I don't think you've got a driver of equal quality to replace him with.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's them trying to cool off the praise they've been giving him to make sure they don't have to pay him too much. But I thought Nico Rosberg actually had a great analysis of this. on TV because he was basically dog whistling Ricardo to make sure he negotiates hard because he was saying, well, he has a much more highly paid teammate.
The thought of him ending back up in Red Bull, but at this current time, he holds no candle to Ricciardo.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I've got a lot of love for Sainz, and I think he's going to be phenomenal over the course of his career. And I kind of don't want to see him get sucked back to be Verstappen's bitch, but at the same time, I think Ricciardo could do a lot more at another team, and I don't think a team like Ferrari that normally suffocates big personalities, I don't think they'll be able to do that to him.
My love for Sainz is the reason I don't want him back in the Red Bull machinery.
Yeah, me neither. I also don't trust. Excuse me. I don't trust Red Bull to consistently have a platform that's up at the front. They seem to have lost their way a little bit, and I know this year they've kind of come good a little, but not been a huge believer in their progress the last few seasons, and the fact Adrian Newey looks like he really couldn't give a crap doesn't help things along either.
And that he had to come back because the junior team didn't really produce.
Couldn't lift the weight, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't pick up the slack from his departure. And sorry, by the way, guys, if the cast has gone off the rails a little bit. I was just in a very close battle there with Bottas, and he was going to take me off. So it was hard to maintain my train of thought. But I'm past him now, and I hope you're expecting me, Mr. Bond, because I am coming for you.
Newey has been achieved all there is in the sport. He'd rather make a fancy road car and get accolades from there now.
Yeah. I've bought his book. I've not read it yet, but it's, for me, the fact that the junior people could not hold a candle and keep it going and took out that massively basic 2017 car that was woeful at the beginning, wasn't it? Like they qualified 15th or whatever it was. It was that was so telling to me that the knowledge has not been passed down. You're always going to need to be looking at who's your successor, who's going to be this, that and the other, which is where one of the reasons why Williams is so terribly off where it needs to be at the moment, because that knowledge passed down has never taken place. And so when you're looking at rule changes and stuff that's coming in either for 2019 or the big thing for 2021, they're only 1 or 3 seasons away, but you look at that and you think, you're on a downward trajectory? Question mark?
Someone considered a genius in his field is not an easy task, though, Simon.
Oh no, absolutely agree. But then you look at, well, it takes a team to run things together, and it can't be just one person. And so stop saying that your engine supplier is crap, and then maybe they might consider giving you their upgrades in Canada.
Yes, which is the next point to make about this, actually, that Renault said to Autosport just yesterday, I believe, that they have an upgraded power unit for Canada, but said that their partners, particularly Red Bull, they actually used that phrase, probably shouldn't be using it. And I don't know if that's some kind of coded message to say we're not giving it to them, or if it's to say, well,
their dealings with Renault were just plain stupid. No
yes,
French
yes, they
culture,
were.
And you know what your statements achieve.
But I mean, the fact that they said, oh well, it's available to partners, but we think particularly Red Bull shouldn't use it. To me, that's kind of like someone saying, go ahead, drink the beer.
Whilst stroking your beard.
Yeah.
In a maniacal laugh. Yeah.
I imagine, the Red Bull team going in there and it's like, here are your engines, guys. Enjoy the upgrade. And it's like, what have you done to it?
Yeah. And by the way, enjoy that lovely new mechanical sound of spanners exploding in the background. Yeah. Not good. Not
so,
good.
they have to go to Honda. They just have to, and it's going to hurt, but it's a bed of their own making, and they're just going to have
years of the making
do it, really.
As well. Years of the making.
The smoke is a feature, no worries.
Yeah.
How very Ferrari of you. Yeah.
Oh, that's just the SDS, the smoke deployment system.
Now seen in Mario Kart 12, The Revenge. Yeah.
I still think that this represents a turning point race for me, where Red Bull were genuinely full of praise for Ricciardo, genuinely full of admonishment for Verstappen. Christian Horner saying he needs to start learning and he's got an exemplary teacher in the next garage. I think that is a very telling quote as well.
Yeah.
And he also said to Channel 4, they asked, do you think this is going to get Max to learn and start driving differently? And he said, it's going to have to, because I don't know what else will. And that was an interesting phrase as well, because you can tell a lot about what a person really means by the particulars of their speech, the delivery and like the exact choice of words in the moment.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't a scripted statement, right? That's speaking off the cuff. And that would worry me.
How far of a turning point. It really is. Horner can say a lot of things now. At the end, Marco and Mattis Chites wield the sword.
Very true.
Can I just say
that
how
is very true.
My phone pronounced that as Matashites, and he has spelt it correctly.
Someone doesn't like Red Bull.
Damn you, Samsung. Yeah. That is very telling and actually quite damning. I hadn't heard that exact phrasing, so that's fascinating to me. I think as well there's.
Sorry, Matashites.
Oh, now we spelled it like that. There we go. Thank you. But yeah, it's it is fascinating because I did wonder how long it would take. What I didn't expect was it to be such a flick of the switch. So now everyone is up in arms because what we are 5-6 races into the season is still yet to actually have a normal race. So yeah, I find it absolutely fascinating that now people are starting to flick the switch on him. I still feel like Ricciardo is maybe now starting to get his praise, but it's almost because he does so well, it's almost expected.
Max
and so we
reminding
just
me of Ailsie or Fisichella.
a Lacey or Fisichella. Thank you, phone.
That is very good question. I'm in the Lacey man myself, but I love Fisichella.
Are we saying Max starts to remind him of those two? But yeah, I was a Lacey man as well out of those two.
But yeah, sorry mate, we're derailing your thought, please.
I can't remember what it was now. Never mind. It could have been that good. But I almost feel like Ricciardo is... that's it. Ricciardo, we almost expect it from him, of that level of brilliance. And it's like we take it for granted in a way that if Perez scores his now mandatory surprise podium, it's now almost expected, so it becomes less and less of an exciting feat as it goes on. And I can't think of anyone else on the grid, I think, at the moment who is taken for granted more than Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's what bothers me, actually, because there's still a lot of people who are quite senior in the sport who sort of see all the doors closed to him somehow, and
I think that
it is a definite balance of power thing.
He has to leave Red Bull.
It is, but the question is, will he be allowed to leave Red Bull? I mean, will there be
the same car will change that?
Because there's first of all that rumor that Ferrari agreed in Vettel's contract that they wouldn't partner him with Ricciardo. I don't know if there's any truth to that, and it seems like a very specific caveat to have in your contract, so I'm kind of sceptical. But that is one rumour. The other rumour, of course, is that Mercedes is close to him because Hamilton is protecting Bottas. And I believe that because, first of all, Hamilton's full of nothing but praise for Bottas at all times, but also
you can't match him.
A year later, Ferrari is Ferrari.
But also because Hamilton has said to 3 different news outlets on 3 different days this week that he thinks either that Ricardo must stay at Red Bull, or can only stay at Red Bull, or should only stay at Red Bull. And those
Please
are statements of a guy. Those are statements of a guy who does not want him as a teammate.
Yeah.
And I found that particularly interesting. And I actually, the more the season goes on, the more I think Bottas might cling on by his fingertips. Because I think he started to come reasonable.
He's got closer, hasn't he?
Yeah, he seems to have found his feet a little bit, and that's all he needed to do. And at the start of the season, I really thought his death certificate had been signed, sealed, delivered, really. But I'm getting less certain about that as the season goes on, because Mercedes have quite a stable ship. He's no longer dropping the ball all the time. You know, so if Lewis isn't...
Both would not like it very much because of the challenge it would prove to be for them. Vettel knows Ricciardo can beat age.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I really think Ricciardo could light the fire in Ferrari that is necessary, but whether Ferrari have the balls to do it and whether Vettel has, you know, the whole thing locked down, that will be the decider, really.
Yeah.
I still stand by my comment that I actually think the bold outside choice would be for him to go to Renault and make it his own team, because I genuinely think Renault will be World Championship winners in the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
I don't think Ricciardo is looking that far ahead. I think Ricciardo wants to be out of F1 by 3 to 5 years' time. I think he'll do a Rosberg. I think he will win the championship and he'll go straight out.
That is a fascinating take, and I wanted to argue with you, but
for a few years, worked out a championship. His standing might fade soon.
Because he talks about going off and doing other things and life being beyond Formula One, and he's already saying basically that time is running out for me, which I find fascinating for someone who's like not. I suppose my head is still in old world F1 where like you retire.
is he even
38.
30 yet?
I'm not sure. I'll have to have a little look at his age. But
Could someone Google that?
Yeah, whilst we're otherwise indisposed.
Because I don't know how old he is, but I get the feeling he's...
that his next contract will be his last in F1 most likely, and he is 28 years.
Aha.
I thought he was 28. Yeah, what the hell is he talking about?
That's why I'm saying that
He is 28.
he'll be a win and go. Because he doesn't. He's like, I just want to win it, and then I want to focus on other things that are coming around the corner, and that's why I think he would rather jump for something that can give him that in the next 2 to 3 years, and then he'll be gone and out of it because he wants to go and then have another career doing something else, whatever that may be.
So you don't think he'll end up in WEC or whatever? I mean, I know he doesn't want to go to IndyCar. He was asked about that when Alonso ran IndyCar, and he said, "Oh, I'll never do Indy. That's too scary."
I could see him doing WEC because I think he's another one of those drivers who would be like, I'd love to have Le Mans 24 hours on my head. There's a race that runs long enough for people with an attention span.
I think if he signs a 4-year deal with a team and wins a title in his first year, i.e. next year, he'll do another year if he wins.
It's always very hard to tell, because I get the feeling like there's a Lewis quality to him in the sense that if he was in a team that was basically going to guarantee him titles up until the next formula change, then I don't see why he would walk away from that. I'm actually surprised, to be honest, that with Lewis being at the end of his contract and with Mercedes seemingly to be on a down wave, I'm kind of curious as to why he's not considering his options a bit more. Because I really thought at the first sign of a Mercedes wobble, he'd be out of there.
Yeah. Because that was essentially what spurred him from McLaren over, wasn't it? He could see signs of a wobble. Can't have this.
Yeah.
I've got a teammate at my heels. Sob, off I go.
I think he is considering his options, otherwise the deal would be done by now.
I can see Hamilton wandering off and having a career in rap, but he'll try and release a single first to judge it.
But as part of his comments, you know, about Ricardo should stay at Red Bull and everything,
Yeah.
he said that he thinks Kimi wants to continue. And I don't know if he's spoken to Kimi, but he basically said, well, there's no reason for Kimi to retire because he's driving really good at the moment and his hunger is there. And I can, as much as I don't want to see it somehow, I can kind of see him being right, because you think, well, it gives Leclerc another year to sort of ripen on the vine a little bit, but have some imagination, Ferrari.
He's quickly becoming the new Rubens Barrichello. I love Barrichello, and I would have quite happily have seen Barrichello probably still in the car today, but I think he would have probably loved to as well, judging by the way how he is. But yeah, there's something like, I don't know. It is uninspiring, but I can absolutely see it happening now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I really feel it should be Kimi's last season, because he's so old. He's so old. And I mean that by Formula One standards, because, you know, he's not much older than you or I, but...
No.
You know,
okay, the Ferraris are done their one stop, by the way.
The other drivers, but more about his state of mind.
But I mean, like,
heavens
to Betsy, he's had, what, 17, 18 years in the sport? I mean, I know he took a break for rally, so less than that, but...
Oh, hello.
Oh, hello. I burnt all my extra fuel. I wanted to turn my engine mode up to try and build some distance.
I had some a terrible pit lane entry, which is why this has happened. I can't do the pit lane entry here.
I'm really slow through this sector, so you might end up getting past me. I actually thought when I came in early, and I was like, I wonder if I can undercut him. I didn't actually in a million years expect it to happen, because the gap between us was huge, but this tyre is so much faster for me.
Oof. That's where I gain those 3/10.
Yeah, I imagine it is, because for some reason I lose about 2/10 there against people, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
I think I leapfrog over the thingies. Right. It's not very often this happens.
We're going to have to race each other, I'm afraid.
We are. Schnauzer.
Sorry, old bean.
Right. Oh, hello, fastest lap.
Getting serious now. Right, stay off the curbs, Ben. We know what happens when you touch the curbs. You lose about a second just for a brief brush.
You should try out those curves.
Go on, it's fun. All the cool kids are doing it. I know your game. Bernie will think you're cool. How has Hamilton got so far ahead of us?
He is 2-stopping with us. Everyone else is 1-stopping, because Raikkonen's on the softs, as is whoever else is behind. That was naughty, that didn't give me DRS. I didn't think you'd got a second ahead. Oh, it has now.
No, not the Durs.
Durs!
I'll get you next time, Gadget.
Ooh. I feel awkward.
No!
Was that on the nose? I think so. Back you go, mate.
Oh, no, I'm intact. But we did smack each other, like, all the way through the corner, and now I've taken a stupid line. Oh, scaries.
Okay.
I think you'll get me in the end, because you're just so much faster today. I don't know what did you do to your differential? Because I imagine we have a very similar setup.
I lowered it because I had 75 each, and now I've gone 70 on the front because I was basically lighting it up out of corners. and I raised my front wing one.
I probably should have made the same change because I seem to be lighting up my rears as well. All this fighting we're doing as well is letting Hamilton ride off into the sunset.
It is, which is letting you win, because I need to have him, and I need to keep you behind Hamilton. And we're not pulling away from this one stoppers either.
No, we may have made a bit of a cock up.
Never mind.
Why is it telling me? Oh! I didn't realise I was so slack on the brakes there. Not my wing.
Oh no, I haven't, have I?
Yes.
No!
But I have the doors.
The dive bomb in the corner every round grinning face.
To be fair, that was a good dive bomb because I thought I braked quite late. Actually, I didn't realise how much more space there was to play with.
I can do it at the just after the 100-metre board.
Yeah, I cannot.
Okay, gap to leader, 6.
4-0, clipped his wings.
Sorry.
It's alright. It's alright. I'm switching to the softs so I can go
you'll
to
be
the
fine.
end.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose time with the broken wing, and maybe, just maybe, I can come good.
I think you might, you know.
All right.
But Raikkonen's got
You
the
need
race.
to have a chat with Charlie about that 0.
Charlie! Mr. Whiting. But Raikkonen's going to win the race because he's right behind me on softs. Which is somewhat worrying. Other things to talk about with Monaco then, whilst we're apart, before we come back together again in a couple of laps with a pit. Can we talk angry negative team radio?
Always.
Award of grumpiest arsehole on the track, Lance Stroll. But
Of course.
what
The Martin Brundle Award.
The Martin Brundle Award. What does that actually achieve when you're saying things like we aren't even racing today, what's the point, and all of that kind of stuff? Because it just feeds back into the mechanics and makes everyone proper miserable. I'd much rather have a rallying Alonso saying things like, come on, we're going to get that 9th, and things like that.
Yeah.
Because it just makes more sense of, I don't know, balancing out the achievements and stuff like that. And like, even when Leclerc had his crash, and still amazingly managed to avoid absolutely ploughing into Hartley completely, it just, he even on the radio then was like, oh, I'm really, really sorry, Shane, good pace today. There's like a hint of positivity in the negativity, and I think that must go such a nice long way.
I'm liking Leclerc more and more, and I really liked him when he came into the sport because of his junior record, but I think he's got such a good head on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And I want to touch very briefly on him before I answer your actual question.
Mm-hmm.
His near crash in qualifying, where he managed to save the car, boy done good.
Yeah.
The boy done good. Did you see that little flick where he had the presence of mind to lift off the brakes even though he was probably going to crash?
Yeah.
Just for that brief second, unlock the wheels to turn away from the barrier and save his mechanics a whole night of work. Good lad.
Mm-hmm.
That's someone you want in your car. Someone who can stay that cool under pressure. That's something that Ricardo had as well at that age.
Millions should find another source of income and bin the Stroll experiment, spoiled and bad for morale and press.
It is, and to be honest though, Captain Eyebrows' dad Big Daddy Stroll, he has been quite critical of the team, and he's seeming to get quite fed up. And I think I think the Strolls might end their partnership with Williams, and maybe try and take the money somewhere else. And even though I know Williams do need the cash, I think it could be a good thing for them. I'm trying to find something positive to talk about with Williams, because I still applaud them for taking a risk with the design of their car.
Leclerc, really impressed, but I felt so bad for Hartley. Can't seem to catch a break, but a really likable character.
Yeah, I know, and I completely agree, and I so wanted him to do well, and like him being a multiple-time WEC champion, you know, to me that has value. I want to see someone like that on the grid.
Kubica might get a shot at some point.
No.
I don't actually think that's a positive.
I don't think that's a positive at all. I tell you what is a positive for Williams. Sirotkin, all the way through the Monaco weekend, was absolutely on fire. And I think that's the first time he's been able to actually show some of the latent talent that he has in that car. And yeah, got it through to Q2, but in free practices was knocking around the top 10, was generally about 0.8 of a second faster than Stroll all weekend, which I found really, really fun and interesting to see. And I think that does him no end of good. And I was really pleased actually with Channel 4, which was where I watched it, because it was a live Channel 4 race this weekend, where they are less Kubica obsessed, for want of a better word. And they were saying hats off to him. He's really, really shown it. What he can do in this weekend has been mighty impressive. Well done. My worry is that will go completely unnoticed, and the instead of saying how well he has done, it becomes but what could Kubica have done? Because that car is a dog no matter who's driving it. It's fundamentally aerodynamically flawed. They've got rid of their chief aero man now, because it has gone down such a horrible path that they need to redesign.
Don't get me wrong. I don't want Kubica to get the shot instead of Sirotkin. I want him in Stroll's seat.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, I would take him on that basis as well. The reason I don't think it's a positive is because, you know, there's a reason that Renault didn't take him, and there's a reason Williams didn't take him. And people always think when I talk like this that I don't like him, or I don't have a fondness for him, or I didn't rate him. I thought he was the world champion we never got to see.
Yep.
I thought he was phenomenal. He was my favourite guy to watch for a period, actually, in the late 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
And some of his laps around Monaco in qualifying would make the hairs on your arms stand up. But I just don't think he can ever have that pace back. And kind of like when a band you like goes on a reunion tour and it's not quite as good, and you sort of think, well, I prefer the memory of them to the reality now. I see Kubica like that. I don't want to lose that image of him as the world champion we were robbed of. It's the same way, you know, people try and forget Michael Schumacher's second run.
Yeah, even though I think he was wrong, he gets wrongly battered for what he did. But I completely agree that it is a second run. It just didn't have the same love affair, did it?
No, I mean, I did think there was merit to Schumacher coming back, and I don't think he dishonoured himself really.
No.
But I can't disagree that there was probably some reputational damage from it.
Yeah.
In the eyes of some fans. You've beaten me out, but maybe we still have a little race on our hands. Although I doubt it, because you've been so much faster than me. I have to say, though, the car's feeling quite good on softs.
Is it? I could not get the softs to work, so if I could avoid it, all the better. But it is definitely the slower strategy.
Second runs only fulfill one purpose, fueling nostalgia, and in the case of Kubica, being able to just put in 10 laps in an F1 race again.
There's... So, playing devil's advocate, Kubica gets a race out somewhere. is woefully off the pace for whatever reason, or qualifies on the back row because it's that Williams,
Continue to cut corners, the
um,
stewards will give you a penalty.
what does that actually achieve beyond saying I could do it?
It's a good question.
That was a
It's certainly one. Yeah, it is. It's.
Oh shit!
I think that's the thing. You know, the
I
people's
think in this
fondness
case,
for him.
saying I could do it would actually mean something to him.
I probably would, but do you remember when Di Resta covered last year
Yep,
for a race?
yep.
I just think it would be a repeat of that. And again, it's not like Di Resta disgraced himself, but by the same measure, he probably didn't do himself any favours for getting the seat the next year.
I don't think he was considered for that seat because he didn't outdo Stroll.
Yeah.
And I know if you're a simulation driver and this, that, and the other, but if you're half a second off the driver that's half a second off Massa in quali, that shows that you're a second off the pace and therefore not viable. End of that discussion. And you can kind of see like how you can be instantly written off over a one thing deal, and that's why I'm quite happy to see him doing some free practice sessions. But again, that free practice session, I don't know, the Polish
I
people.
never rated Di Resta, though, at least not as an F1 driver.
Don't rate him as a commentator either. Ugh. Monotonous drone. Mercedes. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I just don't see for Kubica, apart from maybe some kind of disability pro angle and personal achievement, what that actually proves for him to then come back after all those years and come around, qualify 18th, finish 17th on a good
Give
day.
me Villeneuve over Di Resta, both in the car or behind the mic. Not a lot of wins, but a lot of spectacle face with stuck-out tongue.
Distance to the leader is 60.
I sort of feel. I mean, there are some people who make the argument that, well, you know, maybe he can help develop the car off the back, but I think he's already doing that, and I just don't see why you would put a guy in the car who's not at his best, who's been evaluated and found lacking twice, and is not going to be able to lead the team more than a season, even if you took him back anyway, because he's at the end of his career.
Yep.
I thought it was really good to have him back as a development driver and have him in the paddock and stuff. And I have an immense fondness for the guy and great respect for his driving ability, but I don't know, it strikes me as... It's one of these things that are happening more and more in the world now, that everyone's trying their best to be positive and to include as many people as possible, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But when someone just isn't up to the job, you have to be able to be honest about that.
Yeah.
Because there are no winners by just giving someone a free pass out of fondness or out of being polite, because, you know, people are so harsh on drivers who are genuinely bad in Formula One, and those are guys who have got there on some form of merit, even if that merit is only the ability to raise sponsorship money.
Yep.
That taking on a guy who's been very severely injured and is off the pace by any metric that's been released to us, because I know people will point to the fact he was on paper the fastest Williams driver in one test, but also he wasn't when adjusted for fuel and tyres. So it's such a messy situation. I don't think it's good for Williams, and I don't think it's good for Kubica. I don't even think Kubica would take the seat, to be quite honest with you. He's been so critical of that car.
Yeah, he said he was embarrassed by it, didn't he? So I don't think he would want it if it was thrown to him anyway. I think he's the kind of person that would like to do it out of dignity. And at the moment, with the way and the positioning of how it all is, the dignity is very much intact because it's still a positive news story. If he gets in that car and does a few races and is off the pace, or that car is just continues to be woeful anyway, I don't think that dignity remains, because then it looks a bit sad. I know that sounds really harsh, but I think I think it does start to make the story look sad. I also think that you raise a really interesting and pertinent point against the world trying to be inclusive and the world also wanting the top people at the top of a sporting level. And actually those two things quite comprehensively go, in some ways, into conflict around quote unquote a social justice warrior wanting diversity and certain rights for certain things, I guess. And I don't think that Formula One is necessarily the sport to be parading into that arena, and I think it would be messy for all involved.
No, but it's already starting.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I won't ever argue it's not well intentioned, but like look at the polling from the Monaco Grand Prix, right? Now, whatever your stance is on grid girls, to me, I couldn't care less really whether there's grid girls or not. But you look at the polling from the fans, and they were asking grid girls or grid kids, and grid girls got something like 75% of the vote, right? So what that's telling you is that's your fan base telling you, well, this is what we like to see. We're not commenting on whether it's right or wrong, but this is what we would like to see. But there seems to be absolutely no intention on reversing on grid kids, which actually ties into something you said earlier today about them having big bushy beards, because that's a very Dickensian thing to do as well. Well, we have this problem. Can children possibly be used? You know, like when they used to clean chimneys with kids. It's like, we need someone to hold the signs. What about children?
Yeah.
The thing is, I quite like the idea of grid kids, but it's still representative of something, and that is people who are not fans of the sport but care about, and they are well intentioned. I'm not going to claim they're not.
No.
Trying to come into a sport they have no interest in following, just as they've come into video games and cinema, and the latest one has been like tabletop wargaming.
Diversity is a dishonest word nowadays.
Really?
Because it really represents diversity of thought today.
Yes, really. You know, like all the Warhammer tabletop stuff. They're coming for that now, saying it's not representative enough. Well, the thing is like my argument would be that I don't think the reason young women are not playing tabletop war games is because the soldiers are usually men. I really don't think that's the reason.
No.
I think it's because they're not interested as individuals. I'm not even going to put them in a bucket saying women don't like this stuff. I'm just saying they don't care for their own individual preferences and reasons.
No, I don't look to be. If I go to a character creation on a tabletop game or a computer game, I'm not going to be instantly saddened that I can't recreate my social, political, ethical, sexual orientated space or whatever. It's just I enjoy that game.
Why would I want to be myself in a tabletop game? I don't even want to be myself on a normal day. I mean, me being myself in a dungeon, I'd last about 30 seconds. I'd be in the fetal position on the floor crying because I've got no Wi-Fi connection.
It's a game. It's not all about me as an individual.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, we've got a bit off topic there, but
yeah.
The fundamental point is still there, that there is an element of that there, you know, and
People need to realise they and their opinion are not the centre of the universe.
No.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, you know, you still have to make some effort not to have some sort of monopoly of power or something, but by the same metric, I just think competence in sport and in most things is the measure of the man or woman. You know,
Yeah.
like that's the famous non-racist idea: judge a person by the quality and content of their character, right? And I think we should be very wary of. You know, like I was someone who was very uncomfortable about the whole Billy Monger thing. Not that I don't respect what he's done. I'm not super impressed about him getting back into racing after what happened to him. What annoyed me was that he was getting all this treatment and attention that he would not have otherwise got, and it kind of seems disingenuous in the way it was implying that he would have done. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to judge him on his lap times.
Exactly.
And when I say that, you know, some people will hear, well, you don't want him in the sport. That's not true at all. Alex Zanardi has won championships with no legs.
Yep. At least from a driver's point of view, is not always the case given the need for pay drivers plus expenses at TAC.
Oh, sure, but you still have to be able to put the car around in a representative time. I mean, people who can't, I mean, Delatraz being dropped by Pacific, for example, or Nissany being dropped by Minardi. Like, he had bags of cash, but, you know, he was not capable of being a Formula 1 driver. You still have to be in the ballpark region, no matter how much money you bring. You know, and like Maldonado, he was possibly the best funded Formula 1 driver of recent memory, and he went through so many front wings that he just, even though he came with like 40-50 million a season, which was more than at the time Marussia's budget for a year, you know, he could have funded that team single-handedly. But you know what? They didn't pick up the phone and call him, and there was a reason for that. And so I kind of don't want also to see Kubica's legacy be reduced to guy has accident and comes back to Formula 1.
No, there's much more to be said to that. And I think that
at least Pastor can call himself an F1 race winner, face with stuck out tongue.
Exactly, and that should be should be his quote unquote legacy. I would guess is the pay driver that could.
Yeah, like that's actually a really good point. I mean, this is why I always had a fondness for Pedro Diniz. Yeah, because you know he got his fair share of criticism as well because he was very well funded. But he was an example that just bringing money is not really representative of your ability. And Diniz actually had quite a long career, and I don't think it was a flop. Not
at all.
So
I love that even in our season I love that even in our season finale, we have still managed to shoehorn in a Pedro Diniz reference from absolutely
It must have been
nowhere.
every episode, man. It must have been every episode.
Diniz corner.
Your fondness for Diniz also stems from him financing part of your Grand Prix world career for 10 years.
Yeah, he underwrote the team for the entire time, actually.
Pedro.
But yeah, it's I think solving a problem like Williams is really difficult because on paper they did the right decisions. And I was as pleased as you were, Simon, to see Sirotkin finally show what he's capable of, because you know we'd often said coming into the season that he'll find his feet and people will see there's more to him than the money he brings, and I'm pleased that we've been vindicated in that opinion.
Absolutely. And if they're ever going to have a problem with if there's going to be another Russian driver that can have sponsorship into Formula 1, if Sergei can't do it, please, for the love of God, put Artem Markelov in that Williams instead. Swap Russian for Russian if we have to, and just keep the budget there, because he deserves a shot as well, in my very humble opinion. But yeah,
I thought there was more to him from the get-go. A guy that looks to himself first for improvement is a guy that can go far in my books.
Yeah, and actually Williams have said that on numerous occasions, is that whilst we're busy listening to Stroll literally become a self-harming emo over the team radio as the season goes on.
In F2 for 3 or 4 years, he looks better there than he actually is, in my opinion.
Oh, I love Markelov though, but he's the thing for me is that Sergei has kept his head down and just got on with the job at hand in the same way that Hartley has when he's had awkward problems and stuff like that, and he's willing to learn. He plays a team game, and that for me is worth 10 times the amount of any this doesn't work, throwing a hissy fit around.
Race, don't get me wrong, but I don't think Markelov has F1 talent.
You're breaking his heart with your cold analysis.
Give me that.
The thing about Sirotkin, actually, I was reading an article about him, and what I found particularly interesting is that he's always at the factory.
Oh.
they were saying like he's there every day. He's coming in, he's driving the simulator, he's talking to the mechanics and stuff. And I think that adds a lot of value as well. That he's getting his hands dirty. Whereas Stroll is getting upset and he's locking himself away a little bit. He doesn't want to talk to the media and stuff. Sorokin's trying to get to the bottom of the problems, and I think that'll stand him in good stead as well. What I've also found interesting was that it wasn't just Williams that wanted him. If you listen to Alan Permain talk about him, it's clear that had Sainz not been available, he would be in that Renault, because he was saying that Renault rated him above Kubica as well, and that they were disappointed they couldn't really give him a race seat. I would argue that maybe
that's worked out in their favour, I think.
Yeah, but also bin Palmer off a bit earlier. Because I think Hülkenberg and Sorokin would have been a good lineup as well. But Sainz is a pretty special talent, really, and I think he's more measured over a race distance, and I think if Renault can keep him, he'll eventually become a good leader of the team. I'm curious, actually, because I think this shows to me that Sorokin has long-term, certainly not today, long-term potential to be a team leader, just because of that willingness to engage with the team as a whole and to get stuck into the operational side of Formula One and to do the late nights and to whatever. Am I catching you?
Mildly.
I'm not going to catch you before the end of the race, but it looks like you're getting closer.
I had to do a couple of laps on Mix 1.
You've definitely had the legs on me today, but I'm afraid, Mr. Bond, assuming nothing goes wrong on the last lap, that I have got the standings in the drivers.
But he has the attributes to stick around long term.
Then we get on to the other interesting point that, let's assume Stroll spits his dummy out and leaves, or Williams gets sick of him and quit, and I've just set the fastest Sector 1. Nice. Who could Williams really turn to? Because, this is why I was concerned about them taking Kubica in the first place, because it wasn't a long-term thing, and I didn't trust Stroll to be the next big thing, so...
No, and I don't know who they would pick up. Maybe dependent. They might strike up plop Lando Norris in if they decide to keep Van Dorn.
Another shot.
Who was that? Sorry, would you give Wehrlein another shot? So Wehrlein, by all accounts, is going to be in a Toro Rosso soon to replace Hartley.
Is that what you've heard? I've not heard that. Well, you wait till lap 28 to drop that? I've been pulling out my best filler.
There's talk of it happening for Canada.
I don't really rate him highly after his season vs Ericsson, but people still seem to have him on the list.
I think there's a lot of potential to him, but I felt the same way. He did not remotely wipe the floor with Ericsson, and as much as I love the Ericsson, given the hype around Wehrlein's entry into the sport, he should have done.
Yeah. And Ericsson is still showing really, really well, I think, against Leclerc. Like Monaco, they were nose to tail all race, weren't they? So,
see Leclerc vs Ericsson now.
Exactly, and Leclerc has had.
Difference.
I don't think there's a huge difference. I think it's been good peaks for Leclerc versus, if you take them at base value, I think it's a wider berth between Wehrlein and Ericsson compared to Leclerc and Ericsson, I think. But actually, I think we are champions of the Ericsson anyway, aren't we?
Yeah, someone has to be.
Yeah, damn right. But I think Pascal, by all accounts, he's difficult to work with, apparently, but also, I don't know. Would Mercedes?
You don't tend to come back though, as well. Once you're out,
and not putting Marcus down here, but Veron never really stood out against him. Charles has twice already.
Yeah, agreed.
You never really bounce back from being kicked out to touring cars, to be honest. So
no, and that's quite a drop, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a strange thing as well for him to Toro Rosso, because that would mean what exactly? So
where would you stick him back in the Mercedes lineup? Anywhere, would you?
No, but I mean, maybe Williams makes more sense at least.
Yeah.
Like, why would you stick him? Why would you stick him in a Red Bull? Because Mercedes don't have the capacity, nor the sporting regulations allow for them to supply Red Bull, and they don't want to supply Red Bull. So it doesn't make sense from that standpoint. It also means that Red Bull have no faith on any of their drivers that are currently in the junior formulae.
Yeah. And they've been binning drivers left, right, and centre from their academy as well.
Honestly,
Like,
I'd rather have another look at Caveat than Verhoeven.
Oh, please no. Please, let's not make the poor Russian cry any further. Poor Kvyat. I've lamented over that long enough. I can't deal with that anymore. It's like kicking a puppy. For me, it makes more sense for him to go to Williams because it's still in the Mercedes category. But Red Bull, they've kicked themselves in the foot because they binned Sergei Sete. Oh no! I'm going to shut up. I'm about to associate a Red Bull driver with a contract and kick him out, but he never had it to begin with. Don't mind me. I got Sergio Sete Camera and Nico Kari mixed up. But they've been binning Red Bull development drivers, and then like literally the next race after they binned, they go and win things. And I'm thinking, stop making snap decisions. So yeah, they need to. There's this vast gap. I think it says a lot if they take on a Mercedes development driver into a Red Bull program.
It does. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I think it's a bit harsh to push Hartley out at this point.
Yeah, especially so.
Like, I don't see what you gain by not letting him finish the season, because I don't think he's shown his best yet, and it's not like it's not like his performances are dragging down Toro Rosso, really. So very, very, very strange. But yes, there we go. Another episode where we've managed to not review a race during a race review, although we did touch on like the key points because like Spain, there wasn't really much to talk about. End of the season, you've closed the gap.
Red Bull's problem is that every young driver will now have to live up the max standard, the one they set with sunglasses on.
You're probably right, but I think that's a bar they've set themselves rather than that has been set by any external force.
Yeah,
and I think
agreed.
That could end up being their downfall.
Absolutely.
But anyway, you managed to close me down to 4 points.
Yeah, but you won it.
But I won it. Woo! The first time I've beaten you in a season, and I think I could have been on the podium had I taken the one-stop strategy.
Well, yeah, two-stopping was not the way to go.
Because
David wants a shoey.
I'm not actually wearing shoes, mate. I've just got socks, and my socks aren't watertight.
A socky? Actually, that sounds a bit like a porno.
I'll try and put something on Twitter in a bit. Maybe I can like improvise something. But also, we have secured third in the constructors, which is as a team our best result of all time.
Yeah. Woo.
And so, on that celebratory note, shall we run down like the final points of business?
Yeah.
First thing is quick talk about F1 TV Pro, because Callum asked me a question about it and I said I'd cover it in the stream and then didn't.
Oh, crumbs, yeah.
I still recommend it. I've got F1 TV Pro. I bought the annual subscription. I like the flexibility to watch it whenever I want, wherever I want. I know some people have had trouble with it buffering and dropping down to low resolution. I only get that problem if I try and use my Chromecast. And that definitely is a problem. But for me, if I just watch it on the computer or on my phone, it runs pretty flawlessly, actually. Although I missed the launch week, I watched it as a replay rather than live on launch week. So when the big problems were there, I didn't experience them. That's like my little asterisk. For me, though, I think it's well worth it, particularly now that they've got the archive races. And I can watch the 96 Monaco Grand Prix with Olivier Panis.
Did the archive stuff stay up?
Yes, I believe it does.
Oh.
Because that was a hell of a race, and if no one has seen the 96 Monaco Grand Prix, you have to see it. It's well worth watching all the way through, because that was a hell of a race. And it shows Monaco can throw up interesting results, actually. The only problem I have
with F1 TV Pro is that if you watch the race on a replay or you watch an archived race, it tells you who wins before you watch it. So that is really annoying. Don't do that, please. I don't know why you would do that. Really, really annoying oversight. That aside, though, I can give it a tentative thumbs up, but that is caveated heavily because subjects change, may cause anal leakage. Then we also want to talk about the changes that are going on in the channel because obviously this August we start season 9, and in between season 8 and 9, we're going to stay on the air with our F1 Failcast Extra, which we're still going to have to figure out what the format will be because obviously we don't have time to run another championship and that defeats the object of breaking the show down into series. However, we're trying to go a bit more professional, are we not?
We are indeed. So this is the end of our 8th year of doing stuff, and we love what we do, and we're delighted that anyone vaguely
format in the spirit of future F1.
Get out.
I see Satan's back again.
Satan is back. Yeah, so alongside doing these live shows, which we absolutely love doing, we are looking at getting a bit more professional because we're seeing, as we've alluded to a little bit today, that meme-happy content we think actually is a bit towards the detriment of Formula One, and we'd like to provide a little bit more extra content. So it is currently a work in progress, but we now have a website as well. Woo! And it is failcastf1.com. You're more than welcome to dive over there. It's just literally a welcome post at the moment whilst we set up the website with some new graphics and bits and bobs, which we'll be doing over the coming couple of weeks. But expect little race reviews. Comments will be open so people can leave their opinions, and you can leave us questions in advance for future shows and stuff like that. And no doubt we'll be going on and reminiscing about Arrows, Minardi, and so on and so forth on there with articles as well.
Absolutely. And of course, there'll be associated ways to contact us, so the social media will be cleaner, won't it? We'll have a Failcast F1 Twitter, presumably an email address. Keep an eye on our actual Twitters and Facebooks or whatever you follow us on, because we'll share that information, because this, in my opinion at least, is a good time to hear from you guys, and we've had some suggestions here and there over the last few weeks that it would be nice to sort of flesh out and see what we can do that gathers people in, because it's been a learning process over the years, because when we initially started this podcast it was mostly talking about our own Formula One and video games in general, and we realised that people actually preferred the real F1, and it sort of morphed over time. But there are plenty of ideas bouncing around, and so it's a good time for us to settle things down. I've actually been considering whether to also integrate some Formula E stuff, not into the live show, but maybe as articles on the website, or maybe like as a separate show if we have time.
I'd quite like to do some mini articles on Formula 2 and GP3 as well, because of being the feeder stuff. So if you're interested in that, also let us know as well, please.
Yeah, so naturally that means the Twitch will be changing. I know I didn't stream today. It's because I've got new routers and stuff, and I'm still tweaking things, but we should be back better than ever with Season 9, and there will be a Failcast F1 official Twitch, which I'll share. And we hope to sort of try and take things up a notch and try and get a bit more content out, obviously without overcommitting, because we need to be able to stick to the schedule or whatever. And Simon's already super busy with his channel, but it's also good to separate Failcast F1 from what we do independently. Not that I do anything these days, but
no. But if you're following us on Twitter, then you'll get generally our drunken tweets alongside me banging on about music and other weird and random computer games, and that may not necessarily be of interest to anyone. So if you're just looking for specifically Failcast stuff, that'll be the places to go.
Yeah. So, wow, 8 seasons down. Can you believe it? And best finish to date.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. A pleasure as always, sir.
Yeah.
I'm delighted with our results, to be honest. That third in the constructors in particular actually really does ding my bell, given that Red Bull couldn't touch us. We're obviously open to suggestions for next season regarding teams. We did run a poll, but it only got like 3 votes, so it doesn't count. We will again see you in 2 weeks for whatever we decide the inter-season thing's going to be.
Yeah. We might take it.
But thank you to everyone who joined us. It's a pleasure as always to hang out with you and talk Formula One.
We love it. Yeah, don't forget failcastf1.com. Go over there, subscribe to future updates, and we'll be on the old live streams in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now. Oh, and well done, champ. Well done, champ.
Woo!
Have a good rest of the weekend, guys.
Take it easy. Bye.